The conference chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive station built by the Galactic Concordat centuries ago. Inside its white walls, Ambassador Chen Wei stood alone before the Council of Alien Species. His hands were steady, but his heart raced. Today would change everything. The Azarathi warlord Kresh towered over the podium. His scales gleamed purple under the lights, and his 4 eyes burned with contempt. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. "Humanity has had 50 years, Kresh announced. 50 years to prove your worth. You have failed. Earth will now submit to proper authority." Chen Wei kept his face calm. Around him, representatives from a dozen alien species watched. Some looked uncomfortable. Others smiled. The galaxy had never respected humanity. They thought humans were weak, slow to advance, barely worth noticing. "The terms are simple," Kresh continued. He projected a hologram that filled the room. Lists of demands scrolled past. Earth will surrender 60% of all resources. You will accept Concordat military bases on every continent. Your fleets will be dismantled. Your weapons will be turned over. A governor will be appointed to guide your species toward civilization. The words hung in the air like poison. Chen Wei had known this was coming. For months, the Concordat had been circling Earth like predators. They saw humanity's home world, rich with water and rare minerals. They saw a species that had only been in space for 5 decades. "Easy prey, and if we refuse?" Chen Wei asked quietly. Kresh's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "Then we will teach you the cost of defiance. 2,000 warships are already moving toward your system. They will arrive in 72 hours. We will demonstrate our power on your moon, then your cities, then your people. You will kneel, Ambassador. The only question is how many must die first." Chen Wei looked around the chamber. The other species said nothing. The insect-like Chithar clicked their mandibles nervously. The aquatic Melsari in their water tanks looked away. No one would help. No one had ever helped humanity. "I need time to consult with my government," Chen Wei said. "You have 12 hours, Kresh replied. "Then I expect your answer." Chen Wei bowed his head and left the chamber. His shuttle carried him away from the station, back toward the transport that would take him deeper into Concordat space. But he wasn't going to consult anyone. He already knew the answer. Everyone did. Far from the politics of the Concordat, in the frozen darkness beyond Neptune, something waited. The Oort cloud stretched for light years, filled with ice and rock and secrets. Here, where no alien sensors reached, humanity had built its insurance policy. Admiral Kira Vance stood on the bridge of the Harbinger, a warship that officially didn't exist. Around her, 3,000 other ships hung in the void, dark and silent. For 30 years, humanity had been building, mining asteroids in secret, developing weapons the Concordat had forbidden, planning for the day that would inevitably come. "Status report," Vance said. Her voice was hard, shaped by years of loss and preparation. "All ships reporting ready, Admiral," her tactical officer replied. "The Long Night Protocol is active across all human space. Every ship, every station, every armed soldier is waiting for the signal." Vance studied the holographic display before her. It showed the Azarathi fleet approaching Earth. 2,000 ships, enough to slag continents. The aliens thought they were facing Earth's official defense force. 500 outdated vessels built from Concordat hand-me-down technology. They had no idea what was really waiting. "How long until they're in position?" Vance asked. 60 hours, Admiral." Vance nodded. She thought of her family, dead 15 years now in a mining accident that was no accident. The Concordat had called it equipment failure. But Vance had seen the reports that were buried, seen how Azarathi inspectors had sabotaged the safety systems. Her husband, her daughter, gone because some alien bureaucrat wanted to demonstrate humanity's incompetence. She had joined the Long Night Protocol the next day, had risen through its ranks through sheer determination. Now she commanded humanity's hidden sword, and she would not hesitate to use it. "Send the word," Vance ordered. "All ships begin final preparations. When the deadline passes, we show them what humanity really is." Back on Earth, in the headquarters of the United Terran Assembly, people watched the news with fear. The government had broadcast Kresh's ultimatum. Protests filled the streets. Some demanded submission. Others called for resistance. But most simply felt helpless. How could Earth fight the entire Concordat? President Sarah Okonkwo sat in her office, staring at reports. Her advisors argued around her. Some said negotiate. Others said fight with what they had. None knew about the Dark Fleet. The Long Night Protocol was so secret that even she had only learned of it 3 years ago, when Vance had contacted her directly. "Let them come," Okonkwo had said then, her voice steady despite her shock. "Let them think we're weak. Right up until we're not." Now the moment had arrived. The Azarathi fleet would reach Earth in less than 3 days. The galaxy would be watching, expecting humanity to bow, expecting the weak species to finally accept its place. Okonkwo touched a hidden switch on her desk. A secure line opened, connecting directly to the Harbinger in the Oort cloud. "Admiral Vance," she said. "Madam President," Vance replied. "Are we ready?" "We've been ready for 30 years. Okonkwo closed her eyes. She thought of all the humans who would die and what was coming. She thought of the peaceful future that was now impossible. But she also thought of her grandchildren and whether they would live as free people or as slaves. "Then God help us all," Okonkwo said. "When they arrive, show them fire." The hours ticked down. The Azarathi fleet moved closer. On Earth, people went about their lives, not knowing that everything was about to change. Some prayed. Some prepared to flee. Some simply held their loved ones close. In the Concordat Council chamber, Kresh received confirmation that the fleet was on schedule. He smiled, certain of victory. Humanity would kneel. They always did, these weak species. A show of force, and they crumbled. He had already planned the victory celebration. Ambassador Chen Wei, still aboard his transport, sent one final encrypted message to Earth. It contained just 3 words: "Make them pay." And in the frozen dark beyond Neptune, 5,000 ships began to wake up. Their reactors came online, carefully shielded from detection. Weapon systems initialized. Crews that had trained in secret for decades moved to battle stations. The Dark Fleet stirred like a sleeping dragon opening its eyes. Admiral Vance stood before the massive viewscreen on her bridge. She could see Earth in the distance, a blue jewel hanging in the dark. The world that had given birth to humanity. The world that aliens thought they could simply take. "All ships," she broadcast across the fleet. "This is Admiral Vance. For 30 years we have prepared. We have trained. We have sacrificed. We did this for one reason, for this one moment. The galaxy thinks we're weak. They think we'll surrender. They're about to learn the truth." She paused, and her next words were cold as the void itself. "When the Azarathi arrive, we will teach them what happens when you threaten humanity's home. We will show them that we do not kneel. We do not surrender, we fight. And when we fight with everything we have." The deadline was 12 hours away. The galaxy held its breath. And humanity sharpened its knives. The Azarathi blockade fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 2,000 warships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built according to Concordat intelligence. They arranged themselves in a sphere around Earth, blocking every escape route. It was a display of overwhelming power meant to break the human spirit before a single shot was fired. Warlord Kresh stood on the bridge of his flagship, the crushing dawn. Through the view screen he could see the blue planet below. So beautiful, so rich with resources, soon it would belong to the Concordat, and he would be remembered as the one who brought the humans to heal. "Open a channel to Earth," he ordered. "Let them see what they face." The communication went live, broadcast to every screen on Earth and throughout human space. Kresh's image appeared, towering and terrible. "People of Earth," he began, his voice dripping with contempt. "Your time is finished. Your pathetic defense fleet is outnumbered 4 to 1. Your weapons are toys compared to ours. The deadline has passed. You have not surrendered. Therefore, we will now demonstrate the price of defiance." He gestured, and targeting data appeared on his tactical display. "We will begin with your moon. Watch as we reduce it to rubble. Then you will have one more chance to surrender before we target your cities." The weapons officers began charging the main cannons. Throughout the Azarathi fleet, 2,000 ships prepared to fire. On Earth, billions of people watched in terror. This was the end. There was no escape. Then every sensor on every Azarathi ship began screaming warnings at once. "Sir," the sensor officer shouted. "Energy signatures. Massive power readings appearing throughout the system." Kresh spun toward the displays. "What, where?" "Everywhere, sir. Behind the moon, the asteroid belt, Saturn's rings, Jupiter's moons, they're everywhere." Space itself seemed to tear open as 5,000 ships decloaked simultaneously. They had been there all along, hiding with stealth technology the Azarathi didn't know existed. The vessels were black as night, covered in materials that drank in light rather than reflecting it. They were sleek and deadly, built for war in a way that made the Azarathi ships look clumsy by comparison. The Dark Fleet had awakened. On the bridge of the Harbinger, Admiral Vance allowed herself a cold smile. Open a channel. Galaxy-wide broadcast. Her face appeared on every screen in every ship on every concordant world. When she spoke, her voice was ice and iron. I am Admiral Kira Vance of the Terran Dark Fleet. You came to our home. You threatened our families. You ordered us to kneel. She leaned forward, her eyes blazing. You made a mistake. Humanity does not kneel, we fight, and you're about to learn what that means. She cut the feed and turned to her weapons officer. All ships open fire. Target their command vessels first. Show them what our railguns can do. The human ships fired as one. But these weren't the primitive kinetic weapons the Concordate expected. Human railguns accelerated projectiles to 90% the speed of light, guided by artificial intelligence systems that predicted enemy movement patterns before they happened. The weapons had been developed in secret, refined through decades of simulation and testing. The first salvo caught the Azarathi completely by surprise. Hypersonic tungsten rods punched through shields that weren't designed to stop such fast-moving projectiles. They tore through armor like paper, detonating inside ship hulls with devastating effect. In the first 10 seconds, 50 Azarathi ships simply ceased to exist, vaporized in balls of plasma. Evasive maneuvers, Kresh screamed. Return fire. All ships, return fire. But the human ships were already moving, their engines more advanced than anything the Concordate had seen. They danced between incoming fire, their point defense systems tracking and destroying missiles with perfect accuracy. The humans had studied Concordate tactics for 50 years. They knew every strategy, every weakness. More importantly, they fought without the rules of civilized warfare that constrained the Concordate. No warnings, no mercy, no hesitation. Just pure, calculated violence. A human destroyer squadron swept past the crushing dawn, their weapons tearing into the flagship's flanks. Explosions rippled across the hull. Kresh grabbed his command chair as the ship lurched sideways. How? He gasped. How do they have this technology? His tactical officer's voice shook. Sir, their weapons are reading as models we abandoned centuries ago. But they've improved them, made them better. And they're using tactics that are forbidden under Concordate law. Forbidden? Kresh snarled. There are no forbidden tactics, only winners and losers. But even as he spoke, he felt fear creeping into his hearts. The Azarathi were losing. Impossible as it seemed, the mighty Concordate fleet was being torn apart by a species they had dismissed as primitive. Admiral Vance coordinated the battle from her command chair, her mind connected directly to the Harbinger's tactical systems through a neural interface. She could see the entire battlefield at once, track every ship, every weapon, every movement. Her orders flowed through the fleet at the speed of thought. 3rd Squadron, break left and engage their carrier group. 7th Squadron, form up on me. We're going after their flagship. I want Kresh to understand what he's facing before he dies. The Harbinger accelerated, leading a formation of 20 ships straight toward the crushing dawn. Azarathi point defense fire filled the space between them, but the human ships weaved through it with inhuman precision. Their AI systems, freed from the ethical constraints the Concordate placed on artificial intelligence, calculated trajectories faster than any organic mind could follow. They opened fire at point-blank range. The crushing dawn's shields flared and collapsed, armor buckled. Systems failed across the massive ship. On the bridge, Kresh watched death approaching. Around him, his crew scrambled to contain the damage, but it was hopeless. He had come to conquer Earth. Instead, he was about to die in its shadow. Retreat, he finally shouted, his pride shattered. All ships retreat to the rally point. We need reinforcements. The surviving Azarathi ships broke formation and fled, their faster-than-light drives charging desperately. The human fleet pursued, destroying dozens more before they could escape. Of the 2,000 ships that had arrived, only 1,400 limped away. 600 lay dead in space, their crews killed in minutes. As the last Azarathi vessel vanished, a cheer went up across the human fleet. But Vance didn't join in. She knew this was just the beginning. Damage report, she ordered. Minimal, Admiral. We lost 3 ships, 18 damaged but repairable. Enemy losses at 30% of their force, 30%. In the opening battle, Vance allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before turning to her communications officer. Send a message to all Concordate frequencies. I want them to know exactly what just happened here. The message was simple. Video footage of the battle, unedited and brutal. The Azarathi fleet arriving in arrogance, the Dark Fleet appearing like ghosts, the slaughter that followed, and at the end Vance's face, calm and cold. You wanted Earth to kneel. We showed you what happens when you threaten humanity. This is your only warning. Leave us alone, or we will bring this fire to every world in the Concordat. The choice is yours. The message spread across the galaxy in hours. Species that had never given humanity a second thought suddenly paid attention. The Azarathi, who had seemed invincible, had been beaten by the species they dismissed as weak. In the Concordat Council chamber, panic erupted. How had the humans developed such technology in secret? Where had they built such a fleet? And most terrifying of all, what else were they hiding? Kresh's report arrived hours later. His voice shook with a mixture of rage and fear. They were waiting for us. They've been planning this for decades. Their technology exceeds ours in key areas, and they fight without honor, without rules, without mercy. The council debated through the night. Some argued for peace, for negotiation. Others, particularly the Azarathi, demanded total war. Humanity had to be destroyed before they became an even greater threat. In the end, the war faction won. The Concordat would mobilize the Grand Armada, 50,000 ships from a dozen species. They would crush humanity and burn Earth to ash as a warning to any other species that dared defy the established order. On Earth, celebrations filled the streets. Humanity had won its first battle, but in the war rooms the military leaders knew the truth. The real war was just beginning, and the galaxy was about to learn that when humanity fought, it fought to win at any cost. Admiral Vance looked at the casualty reports. 3 ships lost meant nearly 400 crew members dead. She had known them all, trained with them, shared their hopes for a free humanity. Now they were gone, the first to die in a war that would reshape the galaxy. She touched the memorial wall in her quarters, adding their names to the thousands already there. Then she straightened her uniform and returned to the bridge. All ships prepare for the next phase, she ordered. We've bloodied them. Now we make sure they never threaten Earth again. The Dark Fleet turned toward Concordat space, and the fires of war spread across the stars. The Concordat had never faced a war like this. For 500 years, they had been the dominant power in the galaxy. Species joined them willingly or were conquered. Either way, the pattern was always the same: overwhelming force, quick submission, peace under Concordat rule. Humanity was different. 3 days after the defeat at Earth, the Concordat military shipyards at Kelrath Prime exploded. The attack came without warning. Human ships appeared from nowhere, launched their weapons, and vanished before defense forces could respond. 50 construction bays were destroyed, along with 30 ships under construction. 10,000 workers died in the explosions. The same day, communication relays across 20 star systems went dark. Human saboteurs had infiltrated them weeks earlier, waiting for the signal to strike. The Concordat's faster-than-light communication network, built over centuries, suddenly had gaps like missing teeth. Supply convoys vanished. Fuel depots burned. Military bases woke to find orbital platforms destroyed during the night. Humanity wasn't defending. They were attacking everywhere at once using tactics that horrified the civilized galaxy. In the Concordat Council chamber, representatives demanded answers. How are they doing this? The Chithar ambassador clicked, their insect body trembling. They are one species. We are 12! How can they strike so many places simultaneously? The military commander, an old Azarathi general named Vorash, brought up tactical displays. Because they don't fight like we do. They have no honor codes. They strike civilian and military targets without distinction. They use autonomous weapons, something we banned centuries ago. And they have no supply lines we can target because they're using pre-positioned resources. Pre-positioned? The Melsari representative bubbled through their translator. You mean they planned this? Before the ultimatum? Long before, Vorash confirmed grimly. Intelligence now believes humans have been preparing for war since they first made contact with us. 50 years of smiling and bowing while they built weapons in secret. We walked into a trap. The council chamber erupted in angry voices. The Azarathi Prime Minister Zexara raised her 6 arms for silence. Then we respond with total mobilization, she declared. The Grand Armada will assemble. 50,000 ships. We will advance on Earth and burn it to bedrock. No more warnings. No more mercy. Humanity will serve as an example of what happens to those who defy the Concordat. The vote passed. 12 species committed their fleets to the destruction of humanity. The galaxy prepared for total war, but humanity had no intention of waiting for the attack. Admiral Vance stood in the war room of the Harbinger, studying the holographic map of Concordat space. Red markers showed damaged installations. Blue showed human fleet positions. And at the center, a golden target marked the pride of the Concordat military, the supercarrier Eternal Dominion. "That's our target," Vance told her command staff. "The Eternal Dominion carries 5,000 fighters and serves as the mobile command center for their entire navy. If we destroy it, we cut off the head of their military." Captain Marcus Stone, one of her senior officers, frowned. "Admiral, it's defended by 300 warships. Even with our advantages, the casualties would be severe." "I know," Vance replied. "But we need to show them that nowhere is safe, that even their most powerful symbol can burn. Fear is a weapon, Captain. We need to wield it." Stone looked uncomfortable but nodded. He was one of the few officers who still argued for restraint, for rules of engagement. Vance respected that, even though she couldn't afford to follow his advice. The strike force assembled in the outer rim of the Grendel Nebula, 50 of humanity's fastest ships. They would use the nebula's dense gas clouds to approach undetected, then strike hard and fast. It was a suicide mission and everyone knew it. But they volunteered anyway. The approach took 3 days of silent running, the ship's reactors barely ticking over to avoid detection. The crew worked in near darkness, speaking in whispers, every mind focused on the mission ahead. They passed through the nebula's swirling clouds of ionized gas, using their advanced sensors to navigate what would blind Concordat technology. On the third day, they emerged less than a light minute from the Eternal Dominion. The supercarrier was magnificent, a ship 3 kilometers long that gleamed like silver in the light of a nearby star. Around it, the defense fleet maintained a perfect formation. They looked invincible. "All ships," Vance broadcast. "Weapons free. Hit them with everything." The human ships accelerated to combat speed in seconds, their drives far more responsive than Concordat equivalents. They opened fire while still accelerating, their railguns sending depleted uranium rounds screaming toward the enemy at relativistic speeds. The defense fleet reacted, but too slowly. By the time their shields came up and their weapons locked on, 20 ships were already dying. Human missiles, each guided by a dedicated AI, wove through point defense fire with impossible precision. They found gaps in shields, weaknesses in armor, critical systems. The human ships split into 3 groups, each attacking from a different vector. The Concordat ships tried to form up, to present unified shields and overlapping fields of fire. But the humans didn't fight in formations. Each ship was independent, making decisions faster than any admiral could coordinate. "Dark ships now," Vance ordered. From the nebula's depths, 20 more human vessels appeared. These were the truly experimental craft, running without any active emissions at all. They'd been waiting in the clouds, invisible even at close range. Now they struck at the Eternal Dominion itself, their weapons already firing as they decloaked. The supercarrier's shields absorbed the first impacts, but the humans had studied the technology. They knew that Concordat shields weakened with each hit, needed time to recharge between major impacts. So they hit the same point over and over, concentrating fire with mechanical precision. The shields collapsed. Human weapons tore into the Eternal Dominion's hull. On the carrier's bridge, Admiral Kelrath watched his ship die around him. Explosions rippled through the fighter bays. The hangar decompressed, venting 5,000 fighters into space like seeds from a broken pod. Secondary explosions walked across the hull as fuel stores ignited. "All hands, abandon ship," Kelrath ordered, his voice breaking. The Eternal Dominion had served the Concordat for 200 years. Now it would become a tomb. Vance watched the supercarrier break apart, its spine cracking from internal explosions. Escape pods scattered like fireflies. Part of her wanted to order them destroyed to show no mercy, as the Concordat had shown her family none. But she held back. Let them live to carry the message. Nowhere was safe from humanity. "All ships withdraw," she ordered. Mission accomplished. The human fleet vanished back into the nebula, leaving destruction behind. Of the 50 ships that had attacked, 37 survived. 13 had been destroyed in the brutal close-range combat, but they'd killed the Eternal Dominion and 70 of its escorts. The message spread through concordate space faster than light-speed communications could carry it. Images of the burning supercarrier, the pride of their navy reduced to wreckage. Species that had never questioned concordate powers suddenly wondered if they were backing the wrong side. The Chithar opened secret communications with Earth. So did the Melsari. Both species had been forced into the concordate centuries ago, had never forgotten their lost independence. Now they saw a chance. Ambassador Chen Wei, who had escaped the concordate station during the first battle, met with their representatives in a neutral location. They shared intelligence, spoke of old grievances, and planted the seeds of rebellion. The Azarathi manipulated all of us, the Chithar ambassador revealed. They engineered the conflict with Earth because they saw you as a future threat. They would have done the same to any species that grew too strong. Chen Wei absorbed this information, filed it away for future use, but he also saw the fear in their eyes. Fear of humanity, of what the war had revealed about human nature. We fight for survival, he told them. We will not stop until Earth is safe. But we don't want an empire. We just want to be left alone. They didn't fully believe him. How could they when human ships were burning their way across the galaxy? But they wanted to believe. And that was enough. Back on Earth, the celebrations had faded. Casualty reports arrived daily. The dead numbered in the thousands now, with tens of thousands more wounded. Entire ships had been lost with all hands. Families mourned their children, parents, spouses who had died in the fires of war. President Okonkwo addressed the planet, her face haggard with the weight of decision. We did not choose this war, she said, but we will finish it. We will make Earth safe no matter the cost. The cost kept rising. The concordate Grand Armada was assembling, 50,000 ships gathering at rally points across their territory. When they came, it would be the largest military force ever assembled. And they would come not to conquer but to exterminate. Admiral Vance received the intelligence reports and studied them in silence. 50,000 ships. Her fleet numbered 5,000. The math was simple and terrible, but she'd always known it would come to this. Total war, no mercy. The survival of Earth against the might of the galaxy. She activated the communication system and sent a message to every human ship, every station, every soldier. The war had been burning for 3 months and the galaxy was bleeding. Both sides had lost thousands of ships and hundreds of thousands of lives. Space was littered with debris fields that would orbit stars for millennia, silent monuments to the cost of pride and fear. The Concordate struck back with planet-killer weapons, massive devices that could crack a world's crust and boil its oceans. They deployed them against 3 of humanity's outer colonies. New Vancouver, Liberty Station, and Freehold all died in fire. 30 million humans perished in hours. Earth watched in horror as their colonies burned. The celebrations were long gone, replaced by a grim determination. President Okonkwo addressed the planet with tears streaming down her face, but her voice remained steady. They want to break our will, she said. They want us to surrender out of fear. They forget that humans learned long ago how to endure. We will mourn our dead. We will honor their sacrifice, and we will make sure their deaths have meaning. Admiral Vance received the news aboard the Harbinger. She had friends on Freehold, people she'd trained with decades ago. Now they were vapor, scattered across the void. She felt the rage building inside her, a cold fury that demanded vengeance. But she pushed it down. Rage made mistakes. Rage lost wars. Instead, she activated the protocol she had hoped never to use. Send the activation codes, she ordered. Reaper Protocol is now live. Across human space in hidden locations that not even most military officers knew existed, automated systems came online. Hundreds of ships, completely unmanned and guided by ruthless artificial intelligence, began their silent countdown. They had one purpose: if Earth fell, they would exterminate every concordate species. Not just military targets, everything. It was mutual assured destruction on a galactic scale. The Concordate received the message 12 hours later. Video footage of the Reaper fleet, each ship marked with the species it was programmed to destroy. The AI explaining in flat, emotionless tones that it would carry out its programming regardless of surrender, negotiation, or pleading. If Earth died, the galaxy would follow. The reaction was immediate and terrified. Species that had supported the war began demanding peace talks. The Chithar and Melsari formally withdrew their fleets from the Grand Armada, citing philosophical differences with current strategy. 5 other species reduced their commitments, but the Azarathi refused to back down. They had lost too much, sacrificed too many of their people. Retreat now would mean admitting that humans, the species they had dismissed as primitive, were their equals. Pride demanded they see the war through to the end. The Grand Armada finally assembled at the Crucible system, a strategic location that controlled 3 major trade routes. 30,000 ships remained after the defections, still outnumbering humanity's fleet 6 to 1. They prepared to advance on Earth in one massive push that would overwhelm any defense. Admiral Vance knew this was the critical moment. She couldn't let them reach Earth. The battle had to be fought here in the Crucible, where humanity could at least choose the terrain. She gathered every available ship, every drone, every weapon platform humanity possessed. 5,000 warships, 3,000 armed merchantmen converted for combat, and 10,000 autonomous fighters. It still wasn't enough, but it would have to be. All ships, she broadcast as the fleets faced each other across millions of kilometers of space. This is the moment we've prepared for. The enemy thinks their numbers will win the day. They're about to learn that humans don't count ships. We count resolve. We count courage. We count the fact that we're fighting for our survival while they fight for pride. Make every shot count. Make them pay for every meter of space. And if you have to die today, take as many of them with you as you can. The Battle of Crucible system began with a storm of missiles. Tens of thousands of weapons crossed the void, each guided by AI that made split-second decisions. Human point defense systems worked overtime, destroying 90% of incoming fire. But 10% got through and ships began dying. The fleets closed with each other at speeds that would have seemed impossible to previous generations. They passed through each other in a brutal exchange of fire that lasted less than a minute, but decided the fates of thousands. Ships exploded. Shields collapsed. Hulls ruptured and spilled their crews into the vacuum. Then came the revelation that changed everything. Admiral, her tactical officer, called out, his voice shaking with awe. We're receiving transmissions from 70 ships in the fleet. They're identifying themselves as Ascended crew. Vance felt ice run through her veins. The Ascended program. She had heard rumors but never confirmed details. Human volunteers who had died but had their consciousness uploaded into the ships themselves, becoming one with the vessels they commanded. Now she watched as those ships fought with precision no organic crew could match. They reacted in milliseconds, calculated trajectories instantly, coordinated their movements with perfect unity. They were still human, still driven by human emotions and will, but they thought faster than any flesh-and-blood person could. One of those ships pulled alongside the Harbinger. Its captain opened a communication channel, and Vance saw a familiar face on the screen. Her sister May, who had died 5 years ago in a test flight accident, or so Vance had been told. "Hello, Kira," May said with a sad smile. I volunteered. "They told me it was the only way to save Earth. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you." Vance stared at the screen, emotions warring inside her. Grief, joy, horror, all mixed together. "May, I thought you were dead." "I mourned you." "I am dead," May replied. "But I'm also alive. And I'm still fighting for Earth, that's all that matters now." The communication cut off as May's ship accelerated into the thick of battle. Dodging fire that would have destroyed any normally crewed vessel, Vance watched her sister's ship dance between enemy fire, saw it destroy 3 concordant vessels in 30 seconds of perfect combat. Around the battlefield, the Ascended ships turned the tide. The Concordat had numbers, but humanity had soldiers who literally couldn't feel fear, couldn't hesitate, couldn't tire. The exchange ratio began to shift dramatically, but the Concordat still had one advantage. They were willing to spend lives without limit. They pressed forward, accepting massive casualties to close with the human ships where their numerical advantage would matter most. The battle became a grinding meat grinder in space. Ships rammed each other when they ran out of ammunition. Crews abandoned dying vessels and used their suits' thrusters to reach enemy ships, trying to cause damage any way they could. The Crucible system became a graveyard for both sides. After 8 hours of continuous combat, both fleets were exhausted. The Concordat had lost 15,000 ships. Humanity had lost 2,000, but neither side could continue. They separated, limping back to repair and resupply. Admiral Vance surveyed the damage reports and felt sick. 40,000 crew members dead, hundreds of thousands wounded, ships so damaged they would take months to repair. And this was considered a victory because humanity had held the line. Ambassador Chen Wei used the pause in combat to reveal the intelligence he'd gathered. In a broadcast to every world in the Concordat, he presented evidence that the Azarathi had manipulated the conflict from the beginning. He showed communications proving they had sabotaged peace efforts, had arranged incidents to make humanity look aggressive, had lied to the Council about human capabilities. The reaction was explosive. Species that had lost thousands of their people in a war they now learned had been manufactured, demanded accountability. The Concordat Council fractured. Some wanted to continue the war against humanity. Others wanted to try the Azarathi leadership for crimes against the Concordat. But before diplomacy could work, the Azarathi played their final desperate card. Deep in their home system, Azarathi scientists activated a device they had been building in secret. It was based on stellar manipulation technology, banned by every civilized species. The device could destabilize a star, turning it into a weapon that would destroy everything in the system. They aimed it at Sol, Earth's sun. The countdown was set for 72 hours. If humanity didn't surrender completely, Earth and all the inner planets would be incinerated when their sun went supernova. The galaxy held its breath. Humanity had 48 hours to decide: surrender and live as slaves or watch Earth burn. President Okonkwo called an emergency session of the Terran Assembly. The debate was fierce. Some argued for surrender. They had fought well, proven Earth's strength, but this was checkmate. Better to live under occupation than to let billions die. Others argued for activating the Reaper Protocol immediately. If Earth died, the galaxy would burn with it. Mutual destruction rather than slavery. Admiral Vance had a third option. "We have 72 hours, she told the Assembly. That's enough time to reach Azarathi Prime. Enough time to make them face the same choice they've given us." "You want to threaten their homeworld?" Okonkwo asked. "No," Vance replied. "I want to give them the chance to save it. We show them the device. We broadcast our evidence of their crimes to their own people. We let them choose. Stop the weapon and negotiate peace or watch their own world die." It was a desperate gamble, but it was the only play they had left. The journey to Azarathi Prime was a nightmare painted across the stars. The human strike force had to traverse 3 Concordat-controlled wormhole nexuses, each one defended by hundreds of ships. They couldn't avoid the battles. They could only fight through and hope enough vessels survived to reach their destination. At the first nexus, they lost 30 ships. At the second, 50 more. By the time they approached Azarathi Prime, Admiral Vance commanded a force of less than 200 vessels, all of them damaged, their crews exhausted and running on nothing but desperation and willpower. But they had made it. And they had 60 hours before Earth's sun would be weaponized. Azarathi Prime was beautiful, a world of purple oceans and golden continents orbiting a binary star system. 3 moons hung in its sky. It had been the center of Concordat power for 300 years. Home to 2 billion Azarathi citizens who had never known war on their doorstep, until now. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Immediately, alarms screamed across the planet's surface. The planetary defense grid came online, 500 orbital platforms and 2,000 defense ships. They formed up between the humans and the planet, but Vance didn't order an attack. Instead, she opened a communication channel that broadcast to every device in the system, every screen on the planet below and throughout Concordat space beyond. "People of Azarathi Prime," she began, her voice calm despite her exhaustion. "I am Admiral Kira Vance of Earth. Your leaders have activated a weapon that will destroy my homeworld in 60 hours. Billions of innocent people will die, including children who have never known war." She paused, letting that sink in. Below, on the planet's surface, citizens stopped in the streets, staring at screens in confusion and fear. "I could destroy this world," Vance continued. "I have the weapons, but I won't. Instead, I'm going to show you something your leaders hoped you would never see." She transmitted the data Chen Wei had gathered, communications showing how Azarathi leadership had manufactured the crisis with Earth. Orders to sabotage human vessels and blame accidents. Plans to eliminate humanity as a potential rival before they became too powerful. Proof of manipulation and lies that had led to hundreds of thousands of deaths across the galaxy. The effect was immediate. On Azarathi Prime, crowds gathered in the streets. Some shouted in anger, demanding to know if it was true. Others wept for the sons and daughters they had lost in a war they now learned had been built on deception. The Azarathi military leadership, safe in their command bunker deep below the capital city, watched the situation deteriorate with growing panic. "She's turning our own people against us," General Varash hissed. "Shut down all communications." But it was too late. The message had already spread, and more importantly, it had reached the scientists operating the stellar weapon aimed at Earth's sun. Dr. Nelith had worked on the project for 3 years, believing it was a defensive measure, a deterrent to protect Azarathi Prime from threats. She had never imagined it would be used offensively, never thought about the billions who would die if it fired. Now she stood in the control center, watching human ships fill her monitors, reading the evidence of her government's crimes. Around her, other scientists wore expressions of horror and betrayal. "We can't do this," one of them whispered. "This is genocide." "We follow orders," the military overseer snapped. "The weapon fires in 60 hours whether Earth surrenders or not. Those are our instructions." Dr. Nelith looked at her colleagues, saw the same doubt in their eyes. They were scientists, not soldiers. They had taken no oath to blindly follow orders. And they were being asked to murder billions of people for a lie. "No," she said simply, "we won't." The overseer reached for his weapon, but 3 other scientists grabbed him first. They overpowered him, locked him in a storage closet, and began the shutdown sequence for the stellar weapon. In orbit above Earth, humanity watched the countdown with held breath. 59 hours, 58, each second feeling like an eternity. President Okonkwo stood in the command center, surrounded by military advisors and civilian leaders, all of them helpless to do anything but wait. Then, with 48 hours remaining, the countdown stopped. The stellar weapon powered down, and a communication came from Azarathi Prime. "This is Dr. Nelith. We are the science team responsible for the stellar weapon. We are shutting it down. We refuse to commit genocide. What our leadership has done is wrong. Please give us a chance to make this right." The message was broadcast across all frequencies. Within minutes, it reached every world in the Concordat. The reaction was seismic. On Azarathi Prime, citizens flooded into the streets by the millions, demanding their leadership step down. The military tried to disperse the crowds, but many soldiers refused orders. Some joined the protesters. The Azarathi government was collapsing from within. In the Concordat Council chamber, the remaining representatives voted to remove the Azarathi leadership from power and authorize criminal investigations. Species that had withdrawn from the war began calling for a complete restructuring of the Concordat. Ambassador Chen Wei seized the moment. He proposed a new framework, a true alliance of equal species rather than an empire dominated by the strong. The Galactic Assembly, where every species had a voice and no one species could force others into war. The debate lasted for days, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The old order had failed. Something new had to rise from its ashes. Admiral Vance received word of the stellar weapons shutdown while still in orbit around Azarathi Prime. She felt the tension drain from her body, leaving her weak and shaking. They had done it. Against all odds, Earth had survived. Her sister's ship pulled alongside the Harbinger one final time. "We won, Kira," May said, her digital face smiling with relief and sadness. "Earth is safe." "At what cost?" Vance asked, looking at the casualty reports that had been scrolling across her screen for months. "Tens of thousands dead, worlds burned, a galaxy traumatized, the cost of freedom," May replied. "No one gives it to you. You have to fight for it. We did, and future generations won't have to." Vance nodded slowly. "What will you do now?" "You and the other Ascended?" "We'll keep watching," May said. "Someone has to make sure this never happens again. We gave up our humanity to save humanity. That's a trade we'd make again." The channel closed and May's ship joined the other Ascended vessels as they moved to the outer reaches of the system. They would become guardians, forever watching over the fragile peace. Over the next months, the galaxy slowly began to rebuild. The Concordat was formally dissolved. In its place, the Galactic Assembly was founded with 23 member species as equals. Humanity took its place at the table, no longer seen as primitive or weak, but respected and feared in equal measure. The Azarathi Empire fragmented into dozens of smaller independent governments. Some embraced the change. Others retreated into isolation, nursing their wounded pride. War crime trials began for the leadership that had engineered the conflict. Warlord Kresh, the architect of the initial ultimatum to Earth, was tried and convicted. He was sentenced to live in exile on a remote colony, forced to watch as everything he had built crumbled. His final statement before sentencing was simple: "I underestimated them. Never underestimate a species fighting for survival." Admiral Vance retired from military service 6 months after the war ended. She couldn't command ships and plan battles anymore. She had seen too much death cause too much destruction. She returned to Earth and spent her days working with organizations dedicated to rebuilding devastated worlds, both human and alien. Captain Marcus Stone, who had argued for restraint throughout the war, took command of the new Galactic Assembly peacekeeping force. The Dark Fleet was renamed and integrated into this new organization. Its mission changed from destruction to protection. Ambassador Chen Wei became Earth's first chancellor in the Galactic Assembly. He worked tirelessly to build bridges between species, to turn former enemies into partners. It was slow work, but he never gave up. The alternative was to return to war, and the galaxy had seen enough of that. President Okonkwo served out her term and then retired to write her memoirs. She was honest about the decisions she had made, the costs of the war, and her doubts about whether it had been necessary. History would judge her, she wrote, but she had done what she thought was right to save Earth. 10 years after the war ended, a new species made first contact with the Galactic Assembly. They were aggressive, militaristic, and demanded immediate submission to their authority. They had conquered a dozen worlds and believed they were invincible. The Assembly's response was swift and united. A fleet of 2,000 ships representing 15 different species appeared at the border. At its head was a formation of black vessels, the former Dark Fleet, now bearing the symbols of peace alongside their weapons of war. The message was delivered by a joint command team, human and alien working together. We tried empire. We tried conquest. We learned the hard way that the strong do not rule the weak. We stand together now as equals. You can join us in peace, or you will learn the same lesson we did. The choice is yours. The aggressive species looked at the United Fleet, studied the battle records from the Human Concordat War, and chose diplomacy.